Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the People's Voice. I am Trey Evans and I am the People's Voice. Thank you again for checking out the podcast this week. As always, it is greatly appreciated. As always, we thank everyone who has taken some time to listen to the podcast today. We do understand that you could be utilizing your time to do something else, so we are appreciative that you're taking that time to spend with us. As always, if this information is enlightening and worth sharing, we do ask that you subscribe to the podcast and turn on notifications. We put out a new episode each and every Friday, which is heard on all podcast platforms. And then we also put a video out on YouTube every Wednesday as well for those who would like to watch the podcast. But in any event, we truly say thank you and welcome to the People's Voice podcast. So today, I want to get into a topic that might be a trigger. So this is a trigger warning for anyone who's listening. Today, I want to get into the topic of funeral services and also the cost of funeral services here in the United States. And, it's one of those topics that unfortunately the conversations surrounding this usually don't take place until we all are up against having to make these arrangements for a loved one, a friend, family member. And oftentimes, many families are just not prepared to to deal with this, from an emotional standpoint and also from a financial standpoint. So I want to talk about this today. I think there's going to be some information that I provide everyone that you may not have known. Maybe you did and you forgot. So this might be a refresher. But I think it's a necessary conversation, and so I want to provide that information today. It's not to be morbid in any way, but it truly is to provide what I feel to be critical information. And I wanted to talk about this today because, as I said on a previous podcast, unfortunately, I recently had a friend who passed away, and it it had been years since I had been at a funeral. I haven't even, been at a funeral. I can't remember the last time I was actually at a funeral, right? Because it's been kind of my practice not to go to them, but for this one I had to be there. But anyway, while I was sitting there, how my mind works, it just I'm just surveying the place, and I'm just seeing dollar signs like all over the place, right? Because I'm like, well, this gotta cost a pretty penny to do this, right? And I wasn't, I didn't want to be, tasteless and ask the family how much, the services cost, and they didn't ask me for, for any assistance. So, not my business, so to speak, but I was very curious about just what the cost of funeral services are these days. And so, one of the first things that I did, I started doing research to look up, what the cost was, and I ended up getting some interesting information from the National Funerals Directors Association, which is an association that represents funeral directors. And on their site, they've laid out, a few statistics that I wanted to share, and then, I'll move on from there. So according to the NFDA, from their 2024 cremation and burial report, they noted that the average cost of a funeral today is about $7,800. Now, interestingly enough, that is the average amount based on the two most common ceremonies for funerals, which are burial funerals and then also cremation funerals. Now, as of the reporting of this report, they noted that the average cost of a traditional burial service, funeral service, was $8,300, while the average cost of a cremation service was $6,200. And that represents about a $2,000 difference. But interestingly enough, as of this report as well, they've also noted that there has been a steady increase in people choosing to have cremation services, funeral services, compared to traditional burial services. In this same report, they noted that the cremation, the rate of the rate that cremations are, has 61% of people are choosing to do, or 61.9% of funeral services are cremations, compared to 33% of standard traditional burial funeral services. So there's almost like a 30% difference in that number. Interestingly enough, they say by 2045 that cremation services are expected to be at 82%, which means that they're expected to see another 20% drop off in traditional burial services. And I'm pointing that out because when you start talking about the difference in the cost, one of the reasons why cremation is becoming a more popular choice is cost involved, right? Because you're talking about a $2,000 difference between traditional burial and cremation. In addition, another reason why cremation is becoming a preferred choice is because ideologies are changing regarding religion. I talked about this in a previous podcast where I think I was talking about the business of church or the business of religious institutions. And, many religious institutions are struggling to not only retain, but also bring in new members because people's ideologies are changing regarding organized religion. Many people are pulling back from it. And so you're seeing cremation starting to get a bump as well, not just from a cost perspective, but also from an ideology perspective, because many times traditional burial was surrounded in ceremonies of specific religions. And since you have people pulling away from that, that's why you also see that number changing. But I thought those were two interesting stats that I wanted to kind of highlight there. But make no mistake about it, funeral services and funeral homes, this is a business, right? And I've said this a million times on this podcast. Everything is a business, and funeral homes and funeral services are no different. Matter of fact, in that same report, they talked about just the number of funeral homes in the United States. And in this report, they say that there are more than 15,000 funeral homes in the United States. Now, get this. Out of those 15,000, funeral homes, funeral homes, cemeteries, and crematories collectively generate over $20 billion a year in revenue. Okay, so this is a business, right?
Men lie, women lie, the numbers don't.
And the numbers are right there in front of you. Now, here are some things that you and that we all should know about funeral services, specifically when you're dealing with funeral homes, cemeteries, crematories. These businesses, right, are supposed to provide you with information regarding their cost structure, meaning that they're supposed to provide you with a pricing list. The reason I bring that up and I emphasize that is because anytime, if any of you who have gone through this, that when the time comes most people want to feel like they're providing their loved one with the best ceremony possible to pay their final respects, so to speak. But there is a cost to that, like I just noted. And in addition, these funeral homes, and not all, let me be clear, but there have been cases where funeral homes have basically been very predatory, right? Because, it's an emotional time and people are not thinking with their wallets, they're thinking with their hearts. And, many funeral homes, or I should say, there have been reports of funeral homes who have taken advantage of that. And you get these exorbitant ceremonies that, many times, people have either can't pay or they end up collecting money from family members to try to get it through. But there are rules, federal rules in place that these funeral homes have to follow. And so I want to highlight what those are, and then I'll close out from there. As I said, this is documented. Matter of fact, CNBC did a piece on this a few years ago where they talked about this very issue. So let me play a piece from that, and then I'll talk about some of the rules that are in place that are supposed to protect individuals from, basically being preyed upon by funeral homes. So let's play this from CNBC, and then I'll close out from there.
Many of these businesses have been scrutinized for attempting to upsell items to grieving families. Some dishonest funeral directors will even insist that families purchase items or services that are not required by the Federal Trade Commission, also known as the FTC. Although it varies state to state, things like wooden caskets, vaults, embalming, and burial in a funeral plot are not required by federal law. Consumer advocates have found that some funeral directors prey on the bereaved to get them to spend more money.
The family members and friends of the person had died is in a very vulnerable state. Some funeral directors take advantage of that, bottom line, and will use different statements such as, you want the best for your loved one, don't you? Or something like, to properly honor your loved one, doesn't this make sense? And things like that. And at that point, they're likely to spend more money and not focus on a budget because, casket B is way better than casket A, and they're not focusing on price anymore. And that can lead to problems.
And that, again, that was a piece from CNBC. But as I just said, and they reiterated there, this has been an issue. This has been a documented issue, and there are rules in place that are supposed to protect you as a consumer from this. As they mentioned in that piece, the Federal Trade Commission has a rule which is called the FTC funeral rule, and in that rule, what is supposed to happen is that you have certain rights that the funeral homes are supposed to, or I should say, you have certain rights that protect you, and information that the funeral homes are supposed to provide you. One of the main things that they're supposed to provide you is what they call the GPL, which is called the General Price List, and the General Price List is supposed to be an itemized list of the various services and costs associated with the funeral service. And this is something that's supposed to be provided to you based on request. Does not obligate you to do business with the funeral home. You are basically looking for, you are basically looking for those costs so you can make the most informed decision possible when it comes to providing a funeral service for your loved one. I'm reading right here from the site, the FTC site. It says your rights under the funeral rule. It says buy only the funeral arrangements you want. It says you can get the price information on the telephone. Funeral directors must give you a price or give you price information on the telephone if you ask for it. You don't have to give them your name. This is very important information, address or telephone number. So if you call and say, well, how much is this? And they say, well, let me get some information and we'll get back to you. You don't have to provide that. They are required to provide you the information over the phone. It says, although they are not required to do so, many funeral homes mail their price lists and some post them online. Either way, they are required to give you that information before you even decide to do any arrangements with them. Also, it says that you can ask to see the price of the caskets without having to go see the casket. So you can ask them over the phone, or some, like I said, some funeral homes post this online and some can mail you this information, a list of what the cost of a casket is. Because, and this is done, again, this is a protection, because what happens is they'll tell you to come in and they'll show you the casket. And again, you're emotional at the time. And so you might choose the most expensive casket that they have. And that really is not the one that's needed, for this, for your service. Now, if you choose to spend that, that there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just giving people the information so you can have a more informed decision. Matter of fact, in that CNBC piece, they talked to the Funeral Consumer Alliance, and I pulled up their report, and they have a report on this. Interestingly enough, this FTC rule, this funeral rule, actually has been in effect since 1984. Matter of fact, reading from that report from the Funeral Consumer Alliance, it says the rule was the first national set of regulations to protect funeral consumers from fraud and deception. It was the first regulation that set out how funeral homes could sell their goods and services and what measures funeral homes needed to take to ensure their consumers get accurate and complete information necessary to make an informed decision. So this rule has been in effect since 1984, but I know, because I didn't know about it, and I know a lot, but I didn't know about this. So this is good information, and of course I'll post this in the video when I post it onto YouTube, so everyone can read through this document. But just to highlight real quick some of the things that are supposed to be disclosed in this GPL. First of all, there's supposed to be very clear and concise information on what the costs are going to be. There can't be any misleading language, language that kind of leans into to move you in a certain direction. There can't be packages, right? So they can't say, well, you can take package A or B or C. It has to be itemized. And in that itemized list, there has to be specific information. That GPL is supposed to list the basic services for the funeral director and the staff overhead costs, and it's supposed to be itemized on there. In addition, they have to list fees like the embalming fee or the casket and cosmetology fee. Now, interestingly enough, and it's said in that CNBC piece, embalming is not required by law. Now, again, funeral homes may require it, especially if the family decides that they want to have a public viewing, an open casket, and it's to preserve the body and things of that nature, because obviously once someone passes away, there's the body starts to decompose, and so they're not to get too morbid, but embalming is not required. So and this is just something that I'm pointing out, but on this GPL, this general pricing list, it's supposed to list all of the charges that are supposed to be part of the service, including the hearse, the limousine, casket costs, transporting of the body from the hospital to the funeral home, cremation. All costs are supposed to be listed. And again, This information is supposed to be provided to you on request. So this is not something that's supposed to be buried in documents. This is not something that you have to go to the funeral home to get. That information can be provided to you over the phone so you can make an informed decision. Because listen, it is a sad time, but it is a business. And we have to be very mindful and prepared for when this happens, to be able to make the best cost decision for ourselves. Just to close out, I was going through a couple of funeral homes, and there was one funeral home here. There was many, but this one is called Ambrose Funeral Homes, and on their site, they have broken down what those costs look like. And again, just as that GPL stated, they have the cost for everything in terms of the funeral director cost. They have the cost for the viewing. They have the graveside service cost. They have the embalming fee, this, that, and the third, cremation, and it goes on and on and on. And for those of you who are watching the YouTube video, you can see this, but I will post this information so everyone will be able to see it as well. But I really wanted to talk about this today because, like I said, I just wanted to inform people that what those costs will look like so you can anticipate it, and then B, knowing that you do have certain rights that protect you from making the most informed decision as possible in this, very sad moment, because there are funeral homes out there that will prey on you in your time of need and not provide you with this information because they're looking to make the most money possible for the services they provide. So just be aware of that. But that is my time for today. I hope this information was informative. As always, if you'd like to leave a comment, you can reach me at any social media platform. I am Trey Evans on all social media platforms. And then you can also reach me at the People's Voice Podcast on Instagram, the People's Voice Podcast. But as always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the People's Voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute.